Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Wonder Woman 1984. What Wonder Woman 1984 is essentially about is we center on, well, Wonder Woman. She's living in the 80s, but she's trying to be a bit more low-key. She doesn't really like people knowing her identity, and she's become this, like, archaeologist of sorts, and, pretty much wants to be incognito, but one day she discovers that there is this wishing rock that is out there that Maxwell Lord has obtained, and if given, it gives that person, a specific type of wish, and things seem to be going okay. This intrigues Wonder Woman until she starts to realize just how deadly and how powerful this object really is, but it also gets her to face off against this character Cheetah, who she has become a bit close to, and so she has to do what she can to try to save the day. So Wonder Woman 1984, I was definitely excited for this sequel. I mean, the first Wonder Woman, I think, is definitely one of the better DCU films. It's a film that I really do enjoy watching a lot, especially on a rewatch. I think it very much holds up in that way, and going into this film, I was just hoping for a really solid sequel. I wasn't hoping for anything amazing because, following a film up like that, a film that was really just a very well-handled origin story, it was a lot more grounded compared to what we had in the other DCU films. It was a lot more self-contained in that way. And asking any film to follow up with that, it's going to be difficult for sure. So I didn't think this film was going to be, like, on that level. But at the same time, I still was very excited for it. I thought there was a lot of potential here for what they really could do. I saw the trailer pretty much every time I went to the theater, and every time I saw it, I got more and more excited for it. I liked the idea of 1984. I liked the characters that they were bringing in, and I just thought overall this could end up being a really, really well done sequel. And, especially in a year where we've had so few comic book films. I think the last one we had was The New Mutants. I was just really excited that we were gonna get this film. I didn't think for a while we were going to. I know I've said that with a lot of movies, but, I legitimately did not think we were going to get this film because of, the circumstances that we're in. I thought that they were just going to encroach upon the release of this film, and because of that, we weren't going to get it this year, but it was announced it was coming out on Christmas Day, not just in theaters, but also on HBO Max. I have that's something that I'm still a little worried about how that's going to impact the industry, but you know what? Just the fact that we were able to get it is something that I was very excited for. I got very excited for Christmas because of it, so I finally did watch it. And I will say this right now, there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of division towards this movie. This film seems to be very polarizing, to the point where the Rotten Tomatoes score has gone down from an 80 to in the low 60s now. So it's it's barely fresh, and it seems like a lot of people are disliking this movie. So you're expecting me to say that this movie is not very good, that I'm not a fan of it, but I'm not going to say that because I actually had a good time at Wonder Woman 1984. This is definitely a very flawed film. It's a step down from the first one for sure, but overall I think this is a very different and very creative kind of sequel, and it does a lot of things that I really wasn't expecting, and I just can't help but appreciate it for that. But we're just gonna try now, starting off with the cast, and I think that's easily the best element of this entire film. I think the entire cast just does a really great job here. I think all the performances in this film are very strong for sure. Let's first talk about Gal Gadot, who this is an actress that a lot of people have been very, let's just say they've been very they've been very divided on as well. This is an actress that, kind of came out of nowhere in the first film. People weren't sure if she'd be good, and she really blew them away, and I actually think she might be even better in this film. She's grown into this role very well. You can tell how much she understands the character at this point. She's very fun to watch, but at the same time, she has some really good emotion to the character. There's a lot that Diana is going through in this movie, and I think Gadot handled it with flying colors, and I was very impressed by her performance here. She's a lot of fun to watch. She's got some really funny moments, but she also has a lot of moments where she's very emotional, and I think she handles that very well. And just overall, I think she really does handle this character very well. She keeps it grounded. She keeps it very You know, she keeps it very grounded, she keeps it very authentic, and just in general, you really do buy her into this role, and I do think it's the best she's been yet. So yeah, I really like Gal Gadot here a lot. I think she's such a commanding presence in that way, and I think she very well can hold the film together. This film absolutely does show that. I think any sort of, I think any sort of skepticism or any sort of, confliction over Gadot, I think that should be dispelled after watching this movie, because if there's one thing this film does show is that Gadot was absolutely the right choice to play Wonder Woman. She knows what she's doing. She fits into this role really well, and just in general, I really love what she ended up doing here. And then Chris Pine, of course, he is back in this film, and I can't really get into the hows and the whys, but he is just as fun as ever. He's very charismatic like he was in the first one, but he also is a bit more of a comedic relief in this film, and I think he works really well into that. I enjoyed his role in this film a lot. I think he definitely did do a really good job. The chemistry between these two, once again, it's the thing that really is the heart and soul of the entire film. You buy into their chemistry, you really do feel it throughout the entire movie, and I think that's definitely one of the strong points of this film, is just their chemistry is so strong here, and I think they did a really good job with that overall. But of course, the other two new characters in this film, these were interesting casting choices. A lot of people didn't know how they were going to turn out. I will say right now, Kristen Wigg is, I think, really good as Cheetah. I think she does a really good job as a character of Barbara. She's very nerdy, and she's kind of introverted, but I think she plays the character very well, especially when it comes to the transformation of, that Barbara really does undergo in this film. I think Wigg handled that very well. It could have come off as very hammy, it could have come off as very cheesy, but I think Wigg overall just did a really good job with this role, and I was very impressed by her. It's probably one of her best performances yet, and I really like the way that she ended up handling it when it came to Cheetah here. But for me, the other big standout of this movie, and really the person that makes this entire film for me, is Pedro Pascal, who plays Maxwell Lord, who is amazing in this film. And look, he is really hamming it up throughout this movie. This is a very over-the-top role, but he really does go all in, and you feel the passion he has for this character. You feel a connection to the character because of it, and I think Pascal just did a really great job of that, because there is a true backstory for him as a character. There is a true arc that he's going through, and Pascal leans into that very nicely here. You understand why Lord is so obsessed with this rock and why he wants it so much and what this really means for him, but you also understand what he's gone through within his life, and again, why this stuff is so important to him, and I think Pascal just did a really great job with that role here. I was so impressed by what he ended up doing. I think it's definitely one of his best performances to date, and I think definitely one of the big standout performances in the film to me, especially towards the third act of the film. I mean, again, he really just goes all in, and I really loved his passion throughout this entire film. He is truly amazing in this role, and I think the film is worth watching alone just for his performance. But like I said, these four performances are really great. They anchor the film very nicely, and definitely one of my favorite parts of this entire film. But now let's get to the directing and the writing here, because this is where people seem to be very conflicted over the film. This is where people seem to have some major issues with the film. But I will say Patty Jenkins' directing here is still really great. And what I really like about her directing in this film is that you can tell she was given a lot more creative freedom, because in her interview for the first film, she talked about how the first two acts she really does love, but that third act that everyone's always like shit on, the CGI heavy one, she as well felt like was a betrayal to the actual film. So she just was never a real fan of the way that turned out. Whereas here, I think her directing, you feel that she has more control over what she's doing, because that the film has a very different tone compared to the first one. It's a lot more lighthearted, it's a lot more fun in that way, and I think it really does work for this film. It's very stylish, it has a very specific look and feel to it, and I was laughing a lot during this movie. I think there were a lot of very fun moments throughout this film, and definitely it takes itself a bit less seriously than the first one. A lot of it, again, is more akin to what you would see in, a Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. I've seen a lot of people compare it to that, and I think that definitely is a very apt comparison, because similar to those films, while this film can be very goofy and be a lot of fun, it also isn't afraid to get emotional. It also isn't afraid to get dark, and I think Jenkins just did a really good job with that here. It was clear she knew what she wanted this film to be. It was clear she knew what tone she wanted this film to have, and I think she did a really good job when it came to the directing here. I was very impressed by her directing in this film. You know, there were many points in this film I found myself very entertained, but there were also a lot of points where I found myself very emotionally attached to what was going on, and I think she did a really good job with that. Now, getting into the screenplay here, this is where we get to some of the things that I do think are definitely bothering some people. I really do like the main conflict here. I will say that right now. I like the idea of this wishing rock. I like the idea that, you know, there are various wishes that all of our characters have throughout the film, and there are positives and negatives to them. You know, what this means with what you end up attaining. You know, does this turn out the way that you wanted to? Is it really worth it to make this wish? You know, is your wish going to have severe consequences on the world? That's something that 1984 is very interested in. It's all really about wish fulfillment. Every single one of these characters are seeking something within their life. For Diana, it's the idea of, you know, her and Steve. And I'm not gonna reveal how Steve ends up coming back, but he very much does, and is a very crucial part of her story. And you understand that while she's happy, she hasn't really, you know, she hasn't really fully processed his death yet. She hasn't really moved on from it, and you really do see how that's affecting Diana throughout the film, and I think the film does a really good job with really leaning us into that specific arc. But what it also means for Wonder Woman, because she does go through a very specific arc within this film, this rock starts to have a massive negative impact on her, and I really did love what they end up doing there. I think, you know, despite the fact there's a lot going on in this film, it's still very much Wonder Woman's film, and you really do feel that throughout this entire movie, and I think they did a really good job with that overall here, so I think that's well done. But then you focus on a character like Maxwell Lord, who is someone that he's constantly pressured to be this, like, perfect businessman, and he's very much a workaholic in that way. He feels like there's a lot of pressure mounting on him, and you can understand why he wants this rock so much. You know, he wants that power. He wants that, you know, he wants that sort of, you know, agency within his life that he doesn't really have at the moment. And, you know, he's someone that he makes these TV infomercials, but he doesn't actually mean what he's saying, and he wants to be able to do that. And I think the film does a really good job with leaning into that, why he cares so much about it. But then you look at, say, Barbara Minerva, her character, and, you know, she's someone that just isn't very well respected. She looks at someone like Diana and how respected that she is, and she really wants that respect to be given to her. She wants to be able to be taken seriously within the world, and you understand why she cares so much about. So the film does do a really good job of setting up what all of these characters' hopes and desires are, why this matters so much to them, and what this rock could really benefit them. What are they missing if they don't have it? I think all of that is very well laid out, but I think the film also does a good job in leaning into the negatives of said wishes, and I that's something that I definitely was very impressed by within this film. But I also do think that there are some really good moments of character for everyone. The film really does take the time to get you to know everyone before they do make these wishes, and it really does work because once they do make these choices, you understand why they would do that, and I definitely really did appreciate that when it came to this film. I think the screenplay overall, it definitely is messy at points, and that's the thing I will say. This definitely can get very messy, in some areas, and I can see why people are having issues with that. The first hour, especially, of this film, I found to be very messy. There's a lot of cutting back and forth between Diana, between Lord and Barbara. You know, there's a lot of cutting between those between those characters, and it can get messy after a while. But for me, I was still very engaged in the story. I think it still really did work, and I enjoyed the screenplay quite a bit here. And again, like I said, it doesn't take itself as seriously as the first film. There's a lot of moments that are just kind of funny here, and I think they did a good job with that overall, like Steve Trevor coming back and him kind of having the fish out of water story now. It's not a big focus, it doesn't take up a lot of the film, but it's something that just every now and then is fun to come back to, and I think they do a good job with that overall. So I enjoyed the screenplay of this film. I think it's a lot of fun, and definitely I actually really do enjoy it quite a bit. It's definitely one of my favorite parts of the movie is, again, the ambition of it all. That's something I really did appreciate. I like that this film is going for something much different than the first one. The first one was really about war and the impact that it had on Wonder Woman, but also how much she got involved in this conflict and how she tried to stop it. Whereas the second one, again, is all about wish fulfillment, and I think it really does work overall. So I enjoy the screenplay here for the most part. Now, the other big thing, of course, going on in this film is the character of Steve Trevor. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, you know, what's really going on with him? How is he back in this movie? I will say the way they bring him back is not at all what I was expecting, but I do think it works. I think it really does work for this character, and I think the way it affects Diana especially is really well done, and I didn't really have too much of an issue with it. I think it definitely did work. I thought it made sense for the film overall, and I enjoyed it. I did definitely enjoy it. Again, it's not what you might be expecting, but I think it did mostly work in terms of what they decided to do there. The cinematography in this film is really well done. I mean, the 80s look and feel, they really do capture very well, I think, within this film. I mean, the opening chase scene, especially, when it comes to what Wonder Woman ends up doing, I think is really well done. It's a lot of fun, and I think people are really going to appreciate that. There's a lot of really great action scenes within this film. A lot of which you have seen in the trailer, I will say that. A lot of the action scenes you have seen in the trailer, but they're still really fun to watch for sure. I will say there definitely is still some questionable CGI at points. I don't think it's nearly as bad as the first film, though. I think the first film, definitely this was more of an issue. I think they fixed some things within this film, and it definitely does work overall. There's more things they introduce in this film with Wonder Woman's powers, and I think it definitely does work out very well here, and I definitely was overall impressed by the cinematography. But the other thing that really impressed me about Wonder Woman 1984 is Hans Zimmer's score is amazing here. I mean, it truly is this very epic, very bombastic, and just very memorable score that I do think is actually a little bit better than the first one, especially this opening track played on Themyscira. It's so memorable. I love what he ends up doing here. It looms throughout the entire film, and I do think it's some of his best work in a while. This is definitely one of Hans Zimmer's best scores that he's given. You can always guarantee that he's probably going to give a really good score, but for this film, it just really does work, and I really love just how he really went all in on creating this epic theme, and he did in the first one, but here I think it's even better, and I really loved his score in this film. Let's get to the editing, though, because this film is very long. It's 151 minutes, and I'll be honest, it definitely does not need to be that long. The film definitely does feel overlong in quite a few areas, I think. I think there are some things that they definitely could have chopped down. The first hour of this film especially, I did feel was a little too slow. I felt they spent a little bit too much time on these characters. I felt they spent a little too much time on what was actually going on. But once the conflict actually took off, that's when I started to get more into the film. I think once Steve Trevor came in, for me at least, that's when things started to get a little bit better, and I think it mostly did work for this film. So I didn't have too much of an issue with the length, but I will say the film is definitely a bit overlong. As for other flaws within this movie, I will say, as much as I enjoy them really focusing on the 80s, that's not really as implemented in this film as well as I think it could have been. I would have liked to see them explore some things a little bit more. I would have liked for the 80s to play a bigger role in this film, and it does at points feel like you really could have set this anywhere, and it really wouldn't make that much of a difference, and I do think that is a bit of a hindrance to the film overall. Also, the film opens with this really great opening sequence in Themyscira, where you have a young Wonder Woman and her, sort of competing in this very big in this race of sorts, but after that, we never really come back to it. Robin Wright and Connie Nielsen, as good as they are, they're really only in this one scene, and I would have liked to see a little bit more with them. We never really come back to that opening scene, and I feel like the only reason it's there is because they wanted to get them in the film, and I wish that they could have had more to do overall, because I think that definitely was a mistake here. I wanted to see more from those characters, and we just really didn't, and I think that definitely does bring the film down quite a bit at some points. I would have liked to cut back to there, or at least cut back to, what the point of that really was, because it is definitely hard to tell. And like I said, the film can definitely get kind of messy. There are some things that logically just don't really make a lot of sense, but I was still very engaged within the film. I still was into what they were doing. I like the effect that this was having on Wonder Woman as a character who, I'll just say right now, she's not Wonder Woman for a lot of this movie. She doesn't go in costume a lot, but I was still overall invested enough to really care. My only other flaw I will say with this film is that as much as I do enjoy the character of Barbara Minerva, she does feel a little bit underwritten in this film. I think they definitely could have done a little bit more with her. It does sometimes feel like she's just here to battle Wonder Woman, so Wonder Woman has someone to go up against, because Maxwell Lord really is the main villain of this film, and he's a really good one at that. Like I said, he's got a lot of depth to him. He's got a lot of emotion. You understand why he's doing what he's doing. And with Barbara, you do too. Like, I definitely understood what she was doing throughout this film. I just wish we got a little bit more with her, because it felt like there were things they could have leaned a bit heavier into, and they just really didn't, and that definitely did bring down the film just a little bit for me. And like I said, for me, that first hour of the film definitely was a little bit messy. It had me for sure, but I wasn't quite as invested. But once Steve Trevor entered the picture, and once the story actually took off, it really did, I think, start to show its true potential from there. And it really did work for me from there. And I think we had just some really great moments after that first hour. So I think definitely it's a film that can start off a little bit slow, and it definitely is overlawn and messy in quite a few areas, but overall for me, I think it definitely does pick up after that. Over 1984, it's definitely a very different kind of sequel. It's far less serious than the first one. It really does embrace the cheesiness, I think, very well. It's definitely, I think it's carried by its performances, especially Gal Gadot and Pedro Pascal. Both of those two are really amazing here, and I think the movie is worth watching just for their performances alone. I think that the other characters, the way they introduce Cheetah is really well done. I enjoy the look and the feel of this movie. It's got a really good 80s feel to it. It's got a great score by Hans Zimmer. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. I definitely can already see it's not for everyone. It's far more ambitious than the first film. It goes in directions that you really might not be expecting, but overall, I still, at the end of the day, can say I had a really good time with it. I still really did enjoy a lot of what this film was trying to do, and I'm excited to see what else Patty Jenkins decides to do with this character moving forward. So I definitely did have a really good time Wonder Woman 1984, and I am going to give it a B. Look, like I said, I know this film is dividing a lot of people, and I definitely do understand that, but for me, just the fact we were able to get this movie, I think, is definitely a blessing. I think the fact this movie was able to finally come out is something that I definitely really did appreciate, and in a year where we've had so little superhero movies, it was just nice to end off the year with one, so definitely, I encourage you guys to see this film. See it in theaters as well. I didn't see it in theaters. I watched it on HBO Max, but it seems to be doing really well in theaters, which is definitely something that I'm happy to see because, theaters were kind of on the rocks before this film, so it's good to see that this is actually helping them rather than hurting them, so it's good to actually see that for a change. But either way, guys, in my review, Wonder Woman 1984, let me know what you guys saw of this movie overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.